The evening air was cool as Sergeant Raina Henderson pushed her shopping cart toward her car. It had been a long day, and all she wanted was to get home, unpack her groceries, and finally relax. The supermarket parking lot was nearly empty now. Most people had already gone home for dinner. Only a few scattered cars remained under the flickering parking lot lights. Raina had been on leave for 2 weeks now, back home after 8 months deployed overseas. She was a military canine handler, one of the best in her unit. Her job was demanding, sometimes dangerous, but she loved working with the dogs. They weren't just animals to her. They were partners, friends, family. Tonight, her 2 Belgian Malinois dogs, Bruno and Diesel, were waiting in her SUV. She could see her vehicle parked near the alley entrance, about a block away. She had parked there because the main lot was full when she arrived. The dogs were used to waiting. They were trained for patience, discipline, and most importantly, protection. As Raina loaded her grocery bags into her arms, she noticed 3 men standing by a pickup truck 2 rows over. They were loud, laughing about something. She didn't pay much attention at first. People hang out in parking lots all the time, but then she heard it. A word that made her stomach tighten, a racial slur spoken loud enough to carry across the quiet lot. She kept walking, her military training telling her to stay aware but not to react. Don't engage unless necessary. Keep moving. Get to safety. These were the rules she'd learned, rules that had kept her alive in far more dangerous places than a grocery store parking lot. But then she heard footsteps behind her. Not casual footsteps, deliberate ones, following her pace. Raina's heartbeat picked up slightly, but her face remained calm. She had been in tense situations before. She knew how to control her breathing, how to keep her body language neutral. Panic was the enemy. Clear thinking was survival. She glanced over her shoulder, just a quick look. The 3 men were definitely following her now. They had left their truck and were walking in her direction. One of them, a tall guy with a shaved head and a jacket covered in patches, was smiling. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that said he thought this was funny. Raina turned down the alley. It was a shortcut she had used before. A narrow passage between 2 old brick buildings that led directly to the side street where she had parked. The alley wasn't particularly dark, but it was enclosed. Walls on both sides, one way in, one way out. In hindsight, maybe not the best choice. But turning back now would mean walking straight toward the men, and something in her gut told her that was a worse option. The alley smelled like rain and old concrete. Her footsteps echoed slightly. She walked faster, her grocery bags bouncing against her leg. Behind her, she heard the men enter the alley too. Their voices grew louder, more confident. "Hey, where you going in such a hurry?" Raina didn't respond. Engaging would only make things worse. She kept her eyes forward, focused on the end of the alley where she could see the street and her SUV parked under a streetlight. "I'm talking to you," the voice said again, closer now. "You too good to answer?" Another voice joined in, younger, sounding meaner. "Maybe she doesn't speak English," they laughed. The sound bounced off the brick walls surrounding her. Raina's hand went to her pocket, feeling for her phone. Her fingers found it, but when she pulled it out and glanced at the screen, her heart sank. No signal. The tall buildings on either side were blocking it. She was in a dead zone. The footsteps behind her were getting closer. She could hear them spreading out slightly, taking up more space in the narrow alley. They were boxing her in, using tactics that suggested this wasn't their first time doing something like this. "You lost or something," the first voice said. He was close enough now that she could hear his breathing. "This ain't really your neighborhood." Raina's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what this was. She had dealt with racism before plenty of times, in the military, in stores, on the street. Sometimes it was subtle, hidden behind fake smiles and coded language. Other times it was like this, raw and ugly and dangerous. She was almost halfway through the alley now. The end seemed farther away than it should be. Her SUV was right there, maybe 50 yards ahead. Bruno and Diesel were inside. She could picture them, probably lying down in the back, ears perked up, wondering why she was taking so long. The men behind her weren't even trying to hide their intentions anymore. One of them had pulled out his phone. She could see the light from the screen reflecting off the wet pavement. "You getting this?" he said to his friends. "This is gonna be good." Raina's training kicked into overdrive. She ran through her options quickly, methodically. She could scream, but who would hear? The street was empty. She could run, but they were close enough to catch her, and she was carrying grocery bags. She could drop the bags and fight, but there were 3 of them and 1 of her. Even with her military training, those weren't good odds. Then there was option 4, the one they didn't know about. Her hand slipped into her jacket pocket and found her key fob. It wasn't a normal key fob. It was military grade, custom installed in her vehicle specifically for situations involving her K-9 partners. One button locked the doors. Another unlocked them. And the third one, the red button on the side, did something special. It opened the rear hatch remotely and released the dogs. Raina's finger hovered over that button. She didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary. Bruno and Diesel were trained military working dogs, incredibly disciplined, but they were also protective. If they sensed she was in danger, they would respond with force. These men had no idea what they were walking into. "Hey, I'm talking to you." The lead guy was right behind her now, close enough to grab her shoulder. She spun around to face them, her voice steady and firm. "Back off now." The 3 men stopped just for a second, surprised that she had turned to confront them. Then they smiled. The leader, the one with the shaved head, stepped even closer. "Or what?" he said. "What are you gonna do?" His 2 friends moved to flank him. One was filming with his phone, the camera pointed right at her face. The other one, shorter and stocky, cracked his knuckles like he was getting ready for something. Raina's thumb pressed down on the red button. Inside her SUV, 50 yards away, Bruno and Diesel's ears shot up simultaneously. They had heard nothing, but they felt something. A signal transmitted through the vehicle's system directly to their training collars. It was a vibration pattern they knew well. One that meant only one thing: handler in danger. Respond immediately. The rear hatch of the SUV clicked and began to rise automatically. In the dark alley, with the men focused entirely on Raina, no one noticed the movement. No one heard the soft mechanical whir of the hatch opening. No one saw the 2 shadows leap out into the night, muscles coiled, ears flat, eyes locked on their target. Raina looked at the 3 men one more time. She spoke quietly, almost sadly. "I warned you," the leader laughed. "Warned us about what?" That's when he heard it. A sound that made the blood drain from his face. A low rumbling growl that came from somewhere behind him in the darkness. Not 1 growl, 2, and they were getting closer. The leader spun around so fast he almost lost his balance. His eyes went wide, searching the darkness behind him for the source of that sound. That deep, threatening growl that seemed to vibrate through the concrete beneath their feet. "What was that?" the shorter guy whispered, his phone still recording, but now his hand was shaking. Raina didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just stood there, perfectly still, watching them realize that the situation had changed, that they were no longer in control. The growling got louder, closer, and then they saw them. 2 shapes emerged from the shadows at the end of the alley. They moved low to the ground, sleek and powerful, their eyes reflecting the dim light like mirrors. Bruno and Diesel didn't run. They advanced slowly, deliberately, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of training and dozens of real combat situations. These weren't pet dogs. These weren't the kind of animals you see playing fetch in the park. These were military working dogs, each weighing about 85 pounds of pure muscle, trained to track enemies, detect explosives, and protect their handler at any cost. The man with the shaved head took a step backward. "Those are just dogs," he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. "Just dogs," Raina repeated, her tone cold now. "You keep thinking that." Bruno reached them first. He positioned himself between Raina and the 3 men, his body tense, ready to spring. His ears were pinned back against his head, his teeth visible. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. The growl said everything. Diesel circled around to the left, cutting off any escape route back the way they had come. The 2 dogs worked together like they had done 100 times before, like they were 2 parts of the same machine. They knew exactly what to do without Raina having to say a single word. The men were trapped. Walls on both sides, a trained military dog in front, another behind. And Raina, the woman they had been hunting just moments ago, now stood watching them with her arms crossed. "Call them off," the leader said, trying to sound tough but failing miserably. "Call off your dogs. Why would I do that?" Raina asked calmly. "You were following me. Remember, you had plans. I heard what you said." The guy with the phone was still recording, but now the camera was pointed at Bruno. His hand trembled so badly the footage was probably unwatchable. "This is crazy," he muttered. This is insane. You want to see crazy? Raina said. Take one more step toward me, just one. See what happens. Nobody moved. Even the tough guy with the shaved head seemed frozen. His eyes kept darting between Bruno and Diesel, trying to calculate if he could somehow get past them. Every time he shifted his weight, Bruno's growl intensified and he would freeze again. The shortest of the three men, the stocky one who had been cracking his knuckles, suddenly looked like he might cry. We weren't going to do anything, he said quickly. We were just messing around. Just talking. Just talking, Raina repeated. She pulled her phone out again. Still no signal. She walked forward a few steps closer to the street and the signal bars appeared. Bruno moved with her, staying between her and the men, his eyes never leaving them. She dialed 911. No, wait, the leader said, his tough guy act completely gone now. Don't call the cops. Come on, we made a mistake. We're sorry. You're sorry, Raina said, holding the phone to her ear. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference, the dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sergeant Raina Henderson, military ID number 7428563. I'm being detained in an alley behind Morton's Grocery on 5th Street. 3 men followed me here with apparent intent to harm. I've used my K-9 partners to secure them in place, requesting immediate police response. Her voice was professional, calm, like she was reporting the weather. The men stared at her in disbelief. Ma'am, did you say K-9 partners? The dispatcher asked. Affirmative. Bruno and Diesel, military working dogs trained at Fort Carson. They are currently holding 3 suspects in place. The suspects are not injured, but they will not be able to leave until officers arrive. Units are being dispatched now. Stay on the line with me. The guy with the phone looked at his friends. We need to get out of here, he whispered urgently. How? The stocky one hissed back. You see those dogs? They're bluffing. Dogs don't just attack people. Raina heard them whispering and almost laughed. You really want to test that theory? She called out. Diesel's favorite training exercise is taking down runners. He's hoping one of you tries. As if understanding her words, Diesel let out a sharp bark that echoed through the alley like a gunshot. All 3 men jumped. We're staying right here, the stocky guy said quickly. We're not moving. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The sound grew louder, closer. Red and blue lights started flashing at the end of the alley, painting the brick walls in alternating colors. 2 police cars pulled up, blocking both ends of the alley. 4 officers got out, hands on their weapons, assessing the situation. Military K-9 handler, Raina called out clearly. Dogs are under control. 3 suspects secured. One of the officers, a woman with sergeant stripes on her uniform, approached carefully. She looked at Bruno and Diesel, then at Raina, then at the 3 men who looked like they wanted to disappear into the concrete. Sergeant Henderson, the officer said. From the base? Yes, ma'am. I've heard about you. About your dogs, the officer smiled slightly. Looks like they did their job. They always do. The officer turned to her partners. Cuff them. All 3. This is bulls, the leader started to say, but another officer cut him off. Save it. You're on camera, genius. He pointed at the phone still in the other guy's hand. Drop that phone on the ground now. The man hesitated for just a second, then set the phone down carefully. One of the officers picked it up, handling it like evidence. As the 3 men were handcuffed, Raina gave Bruno and Diesel a hand signal. Immediately, both dogs relaxed. Their tails started wagging. They trotted over to Raina and sat beside her, looking up at her with expressions that seemed to say, Did we do good? She knelt down and scratched both of them behind the ears. Good boys, she whispered. Such good boys. The transformation was remarkable. Seconds ago, these were terrifying attack dogs. Now they looked like gentle pets leaning into her touch, their tongues hanging out happily. One of the officers shook his head in amazement. That's incredible. They just switched off like that. They're trained, Raina explained. They know the difference between a threat and a safe situation. They would never hurt anyone unless that person was actively trying to hurt me. The sergeant walked over to examine the phone they had confiscated. She pressed play on the video and watched for a moment. Her expression darkened. This is all on here, she said quietly. Everything you guys said. Everything you did. Following her. The threats. All of it. The leader's face went pale. That's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks pretty clear to me. The sergeant handed the phone to another officer. Bag this as evidence. She turned to Raina. We're going to need a full statement from you, Sergeant. Of course. Whatever you need. Did they touch you? Physically harm you in any way? No. Bruno and Diesel made sure of that. The sergeant nodded. Those dogs probably saved your life tonight, and saved these idiots from doing something they'd regret for the rest of their lives. She glanced at the 3 handcuffed men being led to the patrol cars, though they're going to regret this anyway. As the men were put into the back of the police cars, the stocky one looked back at Raina through the window. She couldn't tell if it was hatred in his eyes or fear or maybe both. Bruno growled low in his throat, and the man quickly looked away. Easy, boy, Raina said softly. They're done. It's over, but she knew it wasn't really over. This was just the beginning. There would be statements, reports, possibly a trial. The video evidence would be examined. People would ask questions, make judgments, have opinions. She looked down at Bruno and Diesel, still sitting faithfully beside her. They didn't care about any of that. They had protected their handler. That was all that mattered to them, and right now, as police lights flashed and officers talked into their radios and her hands finally stopped shaking, that was all that mattered to her too. The police station was cold and fluorescent bright. Raina sat in a small interview room with a cup of terrible coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. Bruno and Diesel lay on the floor beside her chair, calm and patient as always. They had been allowed inside as working military animals, which was good because Raina wasn't sure she wanted to be separated from them right now. Detective Morris sat across from her, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a notepad covered in scribbled notes. He had been patient with her, asking questions carefully, making sure he understood every detail of what happened. So you never actually spoke to these men before they followed you into the alley? He asked for the 3rd time. Never, Raina confirmed. I heard them making comments in the parking lot, but I didn't engage. I just kept walking. And the racial slurs they used, you heard those clearly? Crystal clear. They weren't trying to hide it. Detective Morris nodded and made another note. The video from the phone backs up everything you're saying. Shows them following you. Shows them spreading out to corner you. Captures their voices saying some pretty ugly things. He paused. It also shows the exact moment those dogs of yours appeared. I've watched it 5 times now, and it's still impressive. Raina allowed herself a small smile. They're the best at what they do. How long have you been working with them? Bruno's been with me for 4 years. Diesel for 3. We deployed together twice. They've saved my life more times than I can count, and I've saved theirs. That's how it works with K9 teams. You're partners. The detective studied the dogs lying peacefully on the floor. Hard to believe those are the same animals from the video. They look so gentle right now. They are gentle, until they need not to be. Raina reached down and stroked Bruno's head. People think military dogs are just weapons, but they're not. They're incredibly smart, incredibly loyal. They can tell the difference between a real threat and someone who's just walking by. They read body language, tone of voice, even smell the chemical changes in a person when they're being aggressive. That's fascinating, Detective Morris said, and he seemed to genuinely mean it. So when those men were following you, the dogs knew? They sensed my stress level changing, and when I released them, they assessed the situation immediately. They saw 3 men cornering one person, heard the aggressive voices, and understood what was happening. But notice they didn't attack. They contained. That's the difference between a trained military working dog and an aggressive pet. There was a knock on the door and another officer stepped in. She whispered something to Detective Morris. He nodded and looked at Raina. The 3 men are being processed now. They're being charged with stalking, attempted assault, making terroristic threats, and this is going to be prosecuted as a hate crime based on the language they used. He closed his notepad. You're free to go, Sergeant. We have your statement, we have the video evidence, and we have witnesses who saw them following you from the parking lot. This is a solid case. Raina stood up and both dogs immediately rose with her, flanking her sides. What happens now? Now they sit in jail until their arraignment. The prosecutor will contact you about possibly testifying, but honestly, with that video evidence, they might just plead out, facing a jury after chasing a military veteran through an alley while hurling slurs and making threats. Their lawyer is going to tell them to take whatever deal is offered. Good, Raina said quietly. Detective Morris walked her to the front of the station. As they passed through the hallway, other officers stopped to look at Bruno and Diesel. Some smiled, some nodded respectfully. One older officer even gave Raina a small salute. Outside, the night air was cooler now. Raina's SUV had been driven to the station by another officer and was parked right out front. Her groceries were probably ruined by now, but she didn't care. She was just tired. "Sergeant Henderson," Detective Morris said as she reached her vehicle. "Can I tell you something off the record?" "Sure. Those men have been on our radar for months. Small stuff mostly. Bar fights, disturbing the peace, intimidating people. But nothing we could really nail them on. Nothing that stuck." He looked at her seriously. "What you did tonight, standing up to them, getting them on camera, showing what they're really about. You probably stopped them from hurting someone else down the line. Someone who might not have had two trained military dogs watching their back." Raina felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't thought about it that way. She had just been trying to get home safely. "You did good," the detective added. "Really good." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and climbed into her SUV. Bruno and Diesel jumped into the back, settling into their usual spots. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she could see Detective Morris still standing there, watching her leave. The drive home was quiet. Raina's mind kept replaying the events of the evening. The fear she had felt, the adrenaline, the moment when Bruno and Diesel appeared and everything changed. She thought about what could have happened if she hadn't been a canine handler, if she hadn't had that remote release system, if she had just been a regular person walking home. The thought made her feel sick. She pulled into her driveway and sat there for a moment, engine idling, just breathing. Bruno whined softly from the back seat. He always knew when she was upset. "I'm okay, buddy," she said, but her voice cracked. Inside her house, Raina finally let herself fall apart a little. She sat on her kitchen floor and Bruno and Diesel immediately pressed close to her, one on each side. She wrapped her arms around them and cried. Not loud, dramatic crying, but quiet tears that she had been holding back for hours. "Thank you," she whispered into Bruno's fur. "Thank you for being there." Diesel licked her cheek, and despite everything, she laughed. The next morning, Raina's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Apparently, someone at the police station had talked to the local news. The story was everywhere. Military veteran defended by her combat dogs. Canine heroes stop hate crime in progress. Woman uses military training to outsmart attackers. Raina groaned and turned off her phone. She didn't want to be famous. She didn't want to be a story. She just wanted to be left alone. But that wasn't going to happen. By noon, there were news vans parked outside her house. Reporters knocked on her door. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests. Even her commanding officer called to check on her and to let her know that the base's public affairs office was being flooded with media inquiries. "You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to," her CO said. "This is your private life." "But Raina, people are calling you a hero. The video is going viral. You might want to think about making one statement, just to get ahead of this." Raina looked at Bruno and Diesel, who were watching her with their heads tilted, confused by all the commotion outside. "I'm not the hero," she said. "They are," her CO chuckled. "Then tell people that. Tell them what those dogs did. Tell them what military working dogs are capable of. This could be good for the program, Raina. Good for canine awareness. Good for showing people what these animals really do." After she hung up, Raina sat on her couch and thought about it. She had never wanted attention. But maybe her CO was right. Maybe this was an opportunity to show people something important. That evening, she agreed to one interview. Just one. A local news reporter came to her house with a small camera crew. They set up in her backyard so Bruno and Diesel could be there too. The reporter, a young woman named Christina, was respectful and professional. She asked good questions and didn't try to sensationalize anything. "What went through your mind when you realized you were being followed?" Christina asked. Raina thought carefully before answering. "Honestly, my first thought was that I needed to stay calm. Panic makes you vulnerable. My second thought was about my training, my options, and my third thought was about Bruno and Diesel. I knew they were close by. I knew they would protect me if I needed them to. Do you think those men knew what they were getting into?" "No," Raina said simply. "They saw a woman alone. They thought I was an easy target. They didn't know about my training. They didn't know about my partners. They made assumptions based on how I looked, and those assumptions almost got them seriously hurt." "Almost?" "Bruno and Diesel are trained to contain threats, not to attack unless absolutely necessary. If those men had actually touched me, If they had escalated to violence, my dogs would have responded differently. But they didn't have to. The presence of 2 trained military working dogs was enough to stop the situation from getting worse. Christina glanced at Bruno and Diesel, who were lying in the grass nearby, looking perfectly peaceful. They saved your life. They did, Raina agreed. And they've saved other lives too. On deployment, here at home, that's what they do. That's what all military working dogs do. They put themselves between danger and the people they're sworn to protect. They don't think about it. They just do it. The interview aired that night. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. People commented, shared their own stories, thanked Raina for her service. But the comments that meant the most were the ones about Bruno and Diesel. Those dogs are heroes. This is why we need to support military K9 programs. Beautiful animals doing incredible work. Raina read through some of the comments before bed. Bruno's head resting on her lap, Diesel snoring softly on the floor. Maybe her CO was right. Maybe something good could come from this after all. 3 weeks after the incident, Raina found herself standing in front of a crowded community center, holding a microphone she hadn't asked for, and facing about 200 people she didn't know. Bruno and Diesel sat calmly on either side of her, their presence the only thing keeping her from running out the back door. The event had been organized by a local veterans group. They wanted her to talk about what happened, about military working dogs, about self-defense. Raina had said no at first, then no again. And then her CO had called and strongly suggested that she say yes. People need to hear this, he had told her. Not just the story, but what it means. What these dogs represent. What veterans deal with. So here she was, staring at a sea of faces, trying to remember the notes she had written and then left in her car. "Thank you for coming," she started, her voice shaky. Someone in the front row smiled encouragingly. "I'm not really good at public speaking. I'm better at following orders than giving speeches." A few people chuckled. It helped. Most of you know the basic story by now. 3 men followed me. My dogs protected me. The men got arrested. But there's more to it than that. And I think it's important to talk about the parts that don't make it into the news headlines. She took a breath and looked down at Bruno. His brown eyes looked back at her steadily. Just like always. First, I want to talk about fear. When those men started following me, I was scared. Really scared. And I think that's something people don't always understand about veterans. We have training, yes. We've been in dangerous situations, absolutely. But that doesn't mean we stop feeling fear. It just means we've learned how to function while we're afraid. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was listening. I was scared because I knew what could happen. I've seen violence. I've seen what people are capable of when they think no one is watching. But my training kicked in. Not just the physical training, but the mental training. Stay calm, assess the situation. Look for options. Don't panic. A woman in the 3rd row was nodding, her eyes wet. Raina wondered if she had her own story. The second thing I want to talk about is Bruno and Diesel. She gestured to the dogs. These 2 probably saved my life that night. But they're not pets. I love them like family, but they're working animals. They've been trained since they were puppies to do a very specific job. And that job is protection. She knelt down and put a hand on each dog. People see videos of police dogs or military dogs taking down suspects, and they think these animals are aggressive or dangerous. But that's not true. These dogs are incredibly controlled. They only use force when necessary. That night in the alley, Bruno and Diesel could have attacked those men. They had every reason to, but they didn't. They contained the situation. They held those men in place without hurting them. That level of restraint, that's not aggression. That's discipline. Someone started clapping, then someone else. Soon the whole room was applauding. Bruno's tail wagged slightly and Raina had to smile. The third thing is harder to talk about, she continued once the room quieted down. Those men targeted me because of the color of my skin. They made that very clear with the things they said. And that's something that happens more than people want to admit. You can be a sergeant in the military. You can have served your country. You can have saved lives and earned medals. And there will still be people who see you and decide you don't belong, that you're somehow less than they are. Her voice got stronger now. But here's what I want everyone to understand. Those men thought I was powerless. They thought they could intimidate me. threatened me, maybe worse. They made assumptions based on how I looked. And they were completely, utterly wrong. The room erupted in applause again. Someone in the back whistled. "I'm not special," Raina said, raising her voice slightly. "I'm not some kind of superhero. I'm just someone who had training and partners who had my back." But that's exactly the point. We can't always control what other people do. We can't stop bigotry and hatred by ourselves. But we can be prepared. We can learn skills. We can support each other. We can refuse to be victims. After the speech, dozens of people came up to talk to her. Veterans who shared their own stories. Women who thanked her for speaking up. Parents who wanted their kids to meet Bruno and Diesel. Young people interested in joining the K9 program. One older man, probably in his 70s, waited until everyone else had left. He approached slowly using a cane. "I was a dog handler in Vietnam," he said quietly. "German Shepherds. My dog's name was King. He died saving my unit from an ambush." Raina felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be proud. What you did, what your dogs did, it matters. It reminds people that these animals are heroes too. That they deserve recognition and respect." He reached out and gently touched Bruno's head. "Thank you for your service. All three of you." After he left, Raina sat down on the community center steps, suddenly exhausted. Bruno and Diesel lay down next to her, their bodies warm against her legs. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Morris. "Wanted you to know. All three men took plea deals today. They're going to prison. 18 months for the leader, 12 months for the other two, plus probation and mandatory counseling. You won't have to testify. It's over." Raina stared at the message for a long time. 18 months. 12 months. It didn't seem like enough for what they had tried to do, but it was something. It was justice, even if imperfect. Over the next few weeks, more speaking invitations came in. Schools wanted her to talk to students. Veterans organizations wanted her at their events. A military working dog foundation asked her to join their board of directors. Raina was overwhelmed. She had never wanted this kind of attention. She just wanted to do her job, take care of her dogs, and live her life. But slowly she started to see the impact. She received letters from young women who said her story inspired them to join the military. From parents who said their kids were less afraid after learning about Bruno and Diesel. From other veterans who said it helped them feel less alone. One letter in particular stuck with her. It was from a teenage girl who wrote, "I used to think that if someone wanted to hurt me, there was nothing I could do. But you showed me that's not true. You showed me that we can be strong, that we can protect ourselves, that we don't have to be scared. Thank you." Raina read that letter 3 times and then folded it carefully and put it in her wallet. Maybe this was worth it after all. One evening, she took Bruno and Diesel to the park where she liked to run with them. It was the same park she had visited 100 times before. But as they walked through the trails, something felt different. People recognized her now. Some smiled and waved. Others stopped to thank her. A few asked to take pictures with the dogs. Everyone was kind, respectful, but there was something else too. Other women jogging alone seemed to run a little taller when they passed her. Some gave her a nod that said, "I understand. I've been scared too." She realized that she had become something she never intended to be, a symbol, a reminder that you could be targeted and still survive, that you could be afraid and still be strong. As the sun set and they headed back to the car, Raina thought about that night in the alley. How terrified she had been. How quickly everything had changed. How close it had come to being so much worse. But she had survived. More than survived. She had fought back in her own way, with the help of 2 incredible animals who loved her unconditionally. Bruno nudged her hand with his nose, and she scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good boy." Later that night, Raina got a call from the Military Working Dog Foundation. They wanted to create a scholarship program in honor of what Bruno and Diesel had done. Money for veterinary care for retired military dogs, for training programs, for families who adopted these animals after their service ended. "We want to call it the Bruno and Diesel Fund," the woman on the phone said, "if you're okay with that." Raina looked at her dogs, both sleeping peacefully on her living room floor. Bruno was snoring softly. Diesel's paws were twitching like he was chasing something in his dreams. "I think they'd be honored," Raina said. "I know I am." After she hung up, she sat in the quiet of her house and let herself feel grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful for her training. Grateful for Bruno and Diesel. But mostly grateful that something good was coming from something that had started so badly. The world could be cruel and scary. People could be hateful. Bad things could happen in dark alleys when you were just trying to get home. But there was also love. There was also loyalty. There was also courage. And sometimes, when you needed them most, there were two fierce protectors watching over you, ready to risk everything to keep you safe. That was worth remembering. That was worth celebrating. That was worth sharing with the world. 6 months had passed since that night in the alley. Raina stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her dress uniform one last time. The medals on her chest caught the light, each one representing a different moment in her military career. But today wasn't about her past accomplishments. Today was about something entirely different. Bruno and Diesel lay on her bed watching her get ready. They both wore special ceremonial collars, black leather with polished brass fittings. They seemed to know something important was happening, even if they didn't understand exactly what. "You two ready for this?" Raina asked them. Bruno's tail thumped against the comforter. Diesel yawned, showing all his teeth, which made Raina laugh despite her nerves. The ceremony was being held at the state capitol building. The governor had invited her personally. She was going to receive a civilian service award for bravery. But more importantly, Bruno and Diesel were receiving official commendations for their service, not just to the military, but to their community. The drive downtown felt surreal. 6 months ago, she had been just another soldier on leave, trying to buy groceries and get home safely. Now she was heading to meet the governor. Life was strange sometimes. The Capitol building was impressive, all marble columns and tall windows. A woman from the governor's office met her at the entrance and guided her through security. Bruno and Diesel walked calmly beside her, their training evident in every step. They didn't react to the crowds or the cameras or the flashing lights. They just stayed close to Raina, like they always did. In a waiting room backstage, Raina met some of the other people being honored that day. A firefighter who had saved 3 children from a burning building. A teacher who had stopped a potential school shooting by talking down an armed student. An elderly man who had performed CPR on a heart attack victim at a grocery store. Real heroes, Raina thought. People who deserved recognition. "You're the one with the dogs, right?" the firefighter asked. He was young, probably mid-20s, with kind eyes. "I saw your interview. That was incredible what they did." "They're pretty special," Raina agreed. "My daughter wants to work with dogs now," he continued. "She's 10. Watches that video of your dogs about 100 times a day. She says when she grows up she wants to be just like you." Something tightened in Raina's chest. She hadn't thought about young kids watching that video, hadn't considered that children might be looking up to her. "Tell your daughter," Raina said carefully, "that the most important thing isn't the dogs or the training. It's having the courage to stand up when something's wrong. That's what matters." The ceremony began at 2 o'clock. The auditorium was packed with people. Raina could see news cameras in the back, reporters with notebooks, photographers jockeying for position. One by one, the honorees were called up. Each person got a few minutes to tell their story, then received their award from the governor. The applause was genuine and warm. These were people who had done extraordinary things in ordinary moments. Then it was Raina's turn. "Sergeant Raina Henderson." The announcer's voice echoed through the hall, along with military working dogs Bruno and Diesel. She walked onto the stage, the dogs flanking her perfectly. The applause was deafening. People stood up. Some were crying. Raina felt overwhelmed by it all. The governor, a tall woman with gray hair and a warm smile, shook Raina's hand firmly. "Thank you for your service," she said quietly. "And thank you for showing us all what courage looks like." Then the governor did something unexpected. She knelt down in front of Bruno and Diesel and spoke to them directly. "You two are very good boys," she said, scratching each dog behind the ears. "Very, very good boys." The audience laughed and applauded even louder. Even Raina had to smile. When it was time for her to speak, Raina walked to the microphone. She looked out at all those faces, all those people who had come to hear her story. "6 months ago," she began, "I was scared. 3 men followed me into an alley with bad intentions. They thought I was helpless. They were wrong. But I'm not standing here today because I'm special or brave. I'm standing here because I had help. I had training. And I had these two incredible animals who refused to let anything happen to me. She paused and looked down at Bruno and Diesel. Military working dogs serve alongside soldiers in every branch of the armed forces. They detect explosives. They find missing people. They track enemies. They protect their handlers with a loyalty that's hard to put into words. And when their service is done, many of them are retired without the support they need. No health care. No pension. Just a thank you and goodbye. The room had gone quiet. The Bruno and Diesel fund that was created after my incident? That money goes to retired military working dogs. It pays for their medical care, their food, their comfort in their final years. Because these animals give everything to serve us. The least we can do is take care of them when they can't work anymore. More applause, louder this time. But there's something else I want to say, Raina continued. What happened to me that night? It happens to people every day. Maybe not exactly the same way, but people are targeted for how they look, who they are, what someone assumes about them. And most of those people don't have military training. They don't have working dogs. They're just trying to live their lives. Her voice got stronger. So if my story does anything, I hope it reminds people that we all have the power to stand up, to fight back, to refuse to be victims. Sometimes that means physical self-defense. Sometimes it means reporting what happened. Sometimes it just means surviving and telling your story so others know they're not alone. The governor presented her with a plaque. Then she placed special medals on Bruno and Diesel's collars. The dogs sat perfectly still, accepting the honors with the same calm dignity they showed in everything. After the ceremony, the reception was crowded and loud. People wanted photos, wanted to pet the dogs, wanted to hear more details about that night. But one person caught Raina's attention. A young black woman, maybe 19 or 20, stood off to the side waiting patiently. When Raina finally had a free moment, the woman approached nervously. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say thank you." "You're not bothering me at all," Raina assured her. "Thank you for coming. No, you don't understand." The woman's eyes filled with tears. 2 months ago, something similar happened to me. Not exactly the same, but close enough. I was walking home from work and these guys started following me, making comments, getting closer. And I remembered your story. I remembered what you said about staying calm, about being aware, about not showing fear. Raina felt her heart start to beat faster. "I made it to a busy street," the woman continued. "Got to where there were people. The guys gave up and left. And the whole time I kept thinking about you and your dogs. Kept telling myself, stay calm, be smart. You can get through this, and I did. Because of you." Raina pulled the woman into a hug. "I'm so glad you're okay. So glad. I'm okay because you showed me it was possible to be okay," the woman whispered. "Thank you." After she left, Raina had to sit down for a moment. Bruno immediately pressed against her leg, sensing her emotion. Diesel put his head in her lap. This was why it mattered. Not the awards or the recognition or the news coverage. This. Knowing that sharing her story had helped someone else survive their own nightmare. That evening, back at home, Raina sat on her back porch with Bruno and Diesel. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The dogs lay on either side of her chair, relaxed and content. Her phone buzzed. A text from her CO. "Saw the ceremony on the news. Well done, Sergeant. The whole base is proud of you." Another text came in, this one from Detective Morris. "Those 3 guys are adjusting to prison life. Word is they're keeping their heads down, staying quiet. Maybe they learned something after all." Raina hoped they had. Hoped that maybe somehow what happened had changed them, made them think twice about their hatred and their assumptions. But even if it hadn't, even if they came out of prison the same people they went in, it didn't matter as much anymore. Because good had come from that night. Real, tangible good. The Bruno and Diesel Fund had raised over $50,000. 12 retired military working dogs had received medical care they desperately needed. 3 had been adopted by loving families. 1 had even been reunited with its former handler, a veteran who had been searching for his old partner for 2 years. Raina had spoken at 5 schools, 3 veterans groups, and 2 police K-9 training programs. She had received hundreds of letters and emails from people sharing their own stories, thanking her for her courage, asking for advice. She had become something she never expected to be. An advocate, a voice, a symbol of survival. But sitting there on her porch with Bruno's head resting on her foot and Diesel's soft snoring filling the air, she was just Raina. A soldier. A dog handler. A woman who had been scared and had survived. "You know what the best part is?" she said to the dogs. They both looked up at her, ears perked. "The best part is that we're all still here. Still together. Still a team." Bruno's tail wagged. Diesel yawned and stretched, then settled back down. Life would go on. There would be more speaking events, more interviews, more people wanting to hear the story. But there would also be quiet evenings like this one. Peaceful moments. Normal days, and that was enough. More than enough. Raina looked up at the darkening sky and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just safe. Not just grateful. But genuinely at peace. What happened in that alley had been terrifying. But it had also been transformative. It had shown her what she was capable of. What Bruno and Diesel were capable of. What could happen when fear met courage and courage won. She would never forget that night. The fear, the adrenaline, the moment when everything changed. But she would also never forget what came after. The justice, the awareness. The lives touched and changed. In the end, hatred had tried to win and failed. Love and loyalty had prevailed. And that, more than any award or recognition, was worth celebrating. Bruno nudged her hand, asking for pets. Raina smiled and obliged, scratching behind his ears the way he liked. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such good boys. Both of you." And in that moment, watching the last light fade from the sky, surrounded by her loyal protectors, Raina Henderson knew exactly what she was. She was a survivor. She was a warrior. She was home.